Welcome back, book nerds. Like and subscribe to my channel, and thank you for watching. This is the Rhythm of War reread. This is part 3. Okay, so let's just dive right into it. This is the first interlude in part 3. This is Moash or Vire. Brandon keeps changing names on us. He loves to keep us guessing. This really felt like just a villain chapter for Moash. Him just like establishing that he's still one of the bad guys. But Moash is not really a good villain by this point because we have so many better villains that have surfaced in the Rhythm of War. Now the Pursuer, that's a good villain. Very dark and shady. Okay, the next interlude is an interlude with Lift, and I'm not going to really talk about it very much, but there it is, and it's not my favorite. Then the third one is a Taravangian interlude, and I always love the Taravangian stuff. They're really fun to read. Taravangian is being emotional and sad in this chapter. He is not a good person, but somehow Brandon makes you feel for him. Makes you feel the emotion that he's going through. And you have to love him as a villain. And he's all about the tension. He builds the tension so well in these interlude chapters. Okay, now we're in chapter 44. This chapter is filled with tension. This is a well-written Kaladin chapter. It was so good that you could taste it. Kaladin is in peril with Teft, trying to get him out. And you're like, are they going to get him? Are they going to get Teft? Is Teft going to die? It's just like, Okay, chapter 45 is a backstory with Jaxium. Is that how you say it? Jaxium? I don't know. And Jaxium and her mother, and it's just like, twist the knife in my heart. Seriously, man. This chapter is about the beginnings, and it's good to see where these things start. Flashing back it's good to give these characters a little more depth, and I understand why Brandon does it. Okay, we're in chapter 46 now. This is Navani chapter. We get Rabaniel and Navani going back and forth expertly here. They are so interesting together. They're really good characters that play off each other really well, kind of like Taravangian and Dalinar. They interact so effortlessly together, and Brandon writes them so well. Even though these two characters, they're not on the same side, but somehow, they get along. Okay, now we're going back to Kaladin and Teft, and him. The stakes are raised. The danger for Teft is really high, as Kaladin is just desperately trying to get him to safety. This, I feel, is the closest plot line for Kaladin to Way of Kings. This feels like Kaladin did in Way of Kings. The feeling that there is no way that Kaladin is going to be okay. And people are literally after him. Okay, chapter 47, this is fast, this is exciting, this is all over the place. Though this chapter did kind of fall right out of the sky for some reason. It just was like slapping you right in the face. And you're like, what just happened? Though there are some great shout outs to Dawn Shard. So if you haven't read Dawn Shard, you should read Dawn Shard because there's things that you're not going to get. I mean, this is a Nail and Zeth chapter. And it also sets up Dalinar's arc. So there's a lot that goes down in this chapter. And it is like a rocket ship just flying right at you. Okay, chapter 48 is Gavilar chapter, and it was just okay. Chapter 49, the sibling is back, and being very cryptic, I might add. There's a lot of good back and forth between Navani and the sibling in this chapter. And there's great dynamics here between Navani and Kaladin. The characters are so well developed that the dynamics work so well because of how fleshed out the characters are. Before Brandon even starts typing, he knows exactly who these people are. Each book really has moments that these characters work well together, and this is one of those moments. Cal and Bridge 4 in book 1, Cal and Shallan in Oathbringer, and this moment with Cal and Navani. They all interact so so easily together. Okay, chapter 50, Wit is here, and I'm sorry, you gotta love Wit. Wit is such a fun character. Man, he's just such a smart ass. You gotta love him. He just makes every chapter just a little bit better. And Wit has such a good quip with Dalinar in this chapter, man. I literally laughed out loud. I mean, I don't think anyone can say that they truly don't like the character Wit. And also in this chapter, we get a great scene of Yasna stabbing a dude in the throat. Okay, chapter 51, we get a mysterious conversation. Okay, chapter 51 is a Venli chapter, and there are mysterious conversations about odium in this chapter. This chapter is relatively short for Brandon Sanderson. I mean, it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 4.5 pages. So, yeah, short chapter. Not a lot happened. Chapter 53, this is the curiosity of Rabaniel. I mean, there are questions here, like, why did they not kill the Radiants? Why keep them alive in their coma state? I mean, I want to know. I mean, wouldn't it just be easier to kill them? You see more honor and Leshui here. We keep getting tidbits of Syl and her history and what's so special about her. I mean, she's ancient, right? Why is Syl so special? I mean, these are questions that I have that I want to know. Chapter 54, Dalinar and Renarin. We have lots of good shout-outs for Bridge 4 in this chapter. We got some really good back and forth between the two of them. Then chapter 55 hits, and this is an important chapter with Kaladin and Syl. They're really talking about how sad he is, and when he thinks about his brother and how he could better himself. And then at the end, you get a good reconnection with Bridge 4. Okay, now, the next few chapters I'm going to run through really quickly. Chapter 56, we get the Listener. Chapter 57 is a Dalinar flashback. Chapter 58, we're back to Kaladin, thank the gods. Kaladin is on the run. Syl is trying to help him by distracting people so he can go unseen. And chapter 59 is all about the fight scene. The fight scene is great. I mean, if you don't remember, just go back and read it right now. And chapter 60, Lif gets caught. Oh, come on. Okay, chapter 61, Kaladin and Navani are going back and forth trying to find out the information. Then Rabaniel shows up with the sword, and Navani doesn't handle it very well. I mean, he is carrying the sword that he took off of Navani's dead son. So awkward. Chapter 62, Jaxium, more of that heart-wrenching story. Chapter 63, we've got more Kaladin and Syl trying to escape. Chapter 64 is Navani just being cool. Wit being sneaky, Thydakar being Kelsier, and Dawnshard stuff. So read Dawnshard. Chapter 65, Rabaniel and her daughter. Chapter 66, Taravangian and Dalinar going back and forth in the expert way that they always do. Okay, chapter 69 is really into Stormlight history now. The science and the backgrounds of the magic systems. I really thought this section would crawl because when you start just doing world building, it does tend to slow the pace of your novel, but this did not slow it. It was just these little tidbits of information, and it was a very fun, easy chapter to read. Okay, chapter 70 has one of the best action scenes of the book. It's a great Leshui moment. This chapter literally sucks the air from the room. It's hard to breathe when you're reading this chapter. And somehow, in the middle of this intense moment, Brandon Sanderson somehow manages to build up Kaladin's character even more. Character building in an intense moment is difficult. And this is one of my favorite chapters in the entire book. Okay, chapters 71, 72. This is the conclusion of all of this. This is the failure of the tower. And now even more is lost to our heroes. But Cal is not so much in danger at the end of this. It's almost kind of wrapped up in. Usually, when Brandon ends one of these parts, it ends with a cliffhanger like, what? I need to know what's happening. But Cowden's story is actually kind of like tied up with a nice little bow, and which is odd. I really find it difficult for me to say that part three is my favorite part in the book because the entire book is great. So to pinpoint one part that I call my favorite is difficult, but I think I'm going to go on a limb and say that part three is my favorite. Okay, that is the end of part three. I will put up part four in a couple days. So, read fantasy.